My name is Ethan Brooks. For 6 months, I worked the night shift at Blackwater Lighthouse. It stood alone on a jagged rock nearly 12 miles from the mainland. No tourists, no nearby villages, just endless black ocean in every direction. People thought my job was simple. Keep the light running. Check the generators. Write down the weather. Wait for sunrise. What they didn't know was that every lighthouse keeper inherited one rule. A rule written in every logbook for more than 100 years. Never shine the lighthouse beam toward the water after 3 a.m. The first time I read it, I laughed. Why build a lighthouse if you weren't supposed to use its light? When I asked the old keeper before he retired, his face turned completely pale. He looked out across the ocean for a long time before answering. Then he quietly said, "Because the ships aren't the only things looking for the light." That was all he would tell me. 3 nights passed without anything unusual. The ocean stayed calm. The fog rolled in and out. The beam rotated exactly as it should. Then came my 4th night. A storm hit just before midnight. Rain slammed against the glass. The entire lighthouse shook with every wave. At exactly 2:57 a.m., every electrical system inside the tower shut off. The generators were still running, but every light, every radio, every monitor went black. Only the lighthouse lamp at the very top remained alive, slowly turning, sweeping across the sea. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the spiral staircase toward the lantern room. Halfway up, I heard it. 3 loud knocks. Not on the front door, on the outside wall, 30 meters above the ocean. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. There was nothing outside except sheer rock and crashing waves. The knocking came again, closer, as if something enormous was climbing the lighthouse from the outside. I reached the lantern room. The giant lens continued rotating. The beam sliced across the storm. Then, the light landed on something, far out on the ocean. A ship, old, much older than any vessel still sailing today. Its sails were torn. Its hull looked rotten. No navigation lights. No engine noise. It simply floated there, perfectly still, directly in the middle of the storm. I reached for the binoculars. There wasn't a single person on deck, only darkness. The beam continued rotating. For a second, it moved away from the ship. When it returned, the ship was much closer, at least a mile closer. I frowned. That wasn't possible. No ship could move that far without making a wake. The ocean around it remained perfectly smooth, like it wasn't touching the water at all. My radio suddenly crackled to life. A voice whispered only one sentence. "Turn the light away before they see you're watching." The old ship remained perfectly still. Rain hammered against the lighthouse windows so hard it sounded like thousands of tiny stones. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the vessel. It should have been impossible. The waves were nearly 20 feet high. Any normal ship would have been thrown around like a toy, but this one didn't move at all. It floated as if the ocean itself refused to touch it. The lighthouse beam continued rotating. Every time the light swept away from the ship, everything felt normal. Dark ocean, heavy rain, nothing unusual. But every time the beam returned, the ship was closer, not drifting, not sailing, simply closer. Half a mile, then a quarter mile, then so close Ethan could clearly see the rotten wood covering its hull. He grabbed the binoculars again. The deck was still empty, or so he thought. A flash of lightning illuminated the sea. For less than a second, someone stood at the bow, a tall figure dressed in a long black coat, completely motionless. When darkness returned, the figure was gone. Ethan lowered the binoculars. His hands were shaking. "No, I'm seeing things." The lighthouse suddenly trembled, not because of the storm. Something heavy had struck the rock below. The impact echoed through the entire tower. Then came another one. Boom. Another. Boom. It sounded like something enormous was trying to climb the cliffs beneath the lighthouse. He rushed to the maintenance room and checked the foundation cameras. Camera 1. Nothing but crashing waves. Camera 2. The Western Rocks. Empty. Camera 3. Static. Camera 4. His stomach dropped. A massive anchor chain stretched up from the ocean. It wasn't attached to the lighthouse. It disappeared into the black water below, as if something beneath the surface was holding it. The chain suddenly became tight, pulled upward. Then another chain appeared. Then another. Four enormous rusted chains now surrounded the lighthouse. Each one slowly rose from the depths. The ocean wasn't throwing them upward. Something underneath was. The radio crackled again. This time the old keeper's voice sounded terrified. "Ethan, turn the light off. Now." He looked toward the lantern room. The giant Fresnel lens continued turning. The beam swept across the sea once more. The old ship had reached the base of the lighthouse. It hadn't made a single sound. No waves. No engine. No sails. It simply waited beneath him. Then, the front door of the ship slowly opened. One by one, dark figures walked onto the deck. Not sailors. Not fishermen. They all wore old lighthouse keeper uniforms. Dozens of them. Some uniforms looked 100 years old. Some looked almost new. Every one of them carried a lantern. Every lantern was dark. Every keeper slowly lifted his head toward the lighthouse, toward Ethan, toward the light. Then all of them raised one hand together, pointing directly at him. At that exact moment, the lighthouse beam stopped rotating. Every lantern burst into life with the same cold blue flame. The color wasn't natural. It wasn't fire. It was something else. Something that gave off light, but no warmth. The dozens of lighthouse keepers stood perfectly still on the deck of the ancient ship. Every one of them smiled. Not one blinked. Not one looked away. They were all staring directly at Ethan. Then, without warning, every lantern on the ship slowly lifted into the air. No ropes. No hands. The keepers had let go, yet the lanterns floated upward on their own. 1, 5, 10. Soon more than 30 glowing blue lights drifted toward the lighthouse. Ethan stumbled backward. What the hell? The floating lanterns stopped just outside the lantern room windows, hovering silently in the rain. Each one remained perfectly level. Then, every lantern turned. Not physically. The flames themselves turned. All 30 blue flames pointed toward Ethan like dozens of glowing eyes. His radio screamed with static. A different voice came through. Not the old keeper. Not his supervisor. It sounded ancient, as if it belonged to someone speaking through water. Keeper, your light has found us. The glass surrounding the lantern room suddenly cracked. A long fracture spread across one window. Then another. Then another. The entire room echoed with sharp popping sounds. The floating lanterns began moving again. Closer. Slower. Until each one gently touched the outside of the glass. The moment they made contact, every crack stopped growing. The lanterns weren't trying to break in. They were waiting. Ethan looked toward the control panel for the lighthouse beam. The emergency shutoff lever was still there. One pull, and the light would go dark. He grabbed the lever. Before he could pull it, the giant Fresnel lens behind him began spinning by itself. Faster, much faster than normal. The beam swept wildly across the ocean. For a split second, it illuminated the water surrounding the lighthouse. Ethan's blood froze. The sea wasn't empty. Thousands of people stood beneath the surface. Not swimming. Standing. Perfectly upright on the ocean floor. Men. Women. Children. All wearing different clothes from different centuries. Every one of them looked upward, toward the lighthouse, toward him, as the beam continued sweeping. They all raised one hand together, slowly, silently, reaching toward the surface, reaching toward the light. The beam completed another rotation. This time, none of them were underwater anymore. They were standing on top of the waves. Impossible. The storm still raged around them, but the ocean carried them without sinking. Hundreds, then thousands, of silent figures stretched to the horizon, each holding an unlit lantern, each waiting. The ancient voice whispered again through the radio. Every lighthouse belongs to the sea. Every keeper eventually comes home. At that exact moment, one of the floating blue lanterns outside the window slowly drifted through the cracked glass. Without breaking it, it floated into the room, stopped directly in front of Ethan. Inside the blue flame, he saw a face. His own, only much older. Its lips moved, and in Ethan's own voice it whispered, "Don't let your lantern go out." The blue lantern floated silently in front of Ethan. Its flame didn't flicker. It didn't produce heat. Yet he could feel something pulling him toward it. Almost like the lantern wanted him to touch it. He forced himself to step back. The lantern followed, slowly, patiently, keeping the exact same distance between them. His heartbeat thundered inside his chest. He reached for the emergency shutoff lever again. This time he pulled it with all his strength. Nothing happened. The giant lighthouse lens continued spinning. The beams swept across the sea again. Outside, thousands of silent figures remained standing on the waves. None of them moved, except one. An old man carrying a rusted lantern slowly stepped away from the crowd. Unlike the others, he walked toward the lighthouse. Each step echoed through the ocean like heavy footsteps on stone. Step, step, step. He wasn't sinking. The water beneath his feet became perfectly still wherever he walked. The closer he came, the older he looked. His beard was long and soaked with seawater. His lighthouse keeper uniform had almost turned black with age. The brass badge on his chest caught the beam for just a second. Ethan squinted. The name engraved on it made his blood run cold. Thomas Brooks. Brooks, his last name. His grandfather had once told him that their family had produced lighthouse keepers for generations. He'd always thought it was just an old family story. The old man finally reached the base of the lighthouse. He looked up, raised his lantern, then spoke. His voice somehow echoed inside the lantern room, even though he was 30 meters below. Ethan, you've kept the light alive. Now the sea knows your name. Ethan leaned against the window. Who are you? The old man smiled sadly. I asked the same question. The night I became the keeper. Lightning exploded across the sky. For a split second, Ethan saw the old man's face clearly. It looked exactly like the photographs of his great-grandfather hanging in his parents' house. He stumbled backward. No, you're dead. The old keeper slowly nodded. Yes, but the sea doesn't care. The sea never lets its keepers leave. The lighthouse suddenly shook violently. Not from the storm. From below. The entire tower groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. Metal screamed somewhere deep inside the walls. The floating blue lantern darted toward the staircase. It stopped at the entrance, waiting, as if it wanted Ethan to follow. The old keeper shouted from below, "Don't go downstairs. The lantern is lying." The blue flame immediately changed. It turned bright white. The lantern floated back toward Ethan. Inside the flame, he could now see something else. Not his own face. His mother. She looked terrified. She was crying. Ethan, please. I can't find you. Come home. His entire body froze. His mother's voice sounded perfect. Exactly the way she always spoke. The old keeper screamed from outside. "It copies the people you love." The lanterns. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. No, you're not my mother. The smiling face inside the lantern didn't disappear. Instead, it laughed. Not loudly. Softly. Almost lovingly. The sound echoed through the lantern room even though the flame never moved. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the lantern had drifted back toward the broken window. Outside, the old keeper was gone. The thousands of silent figures standing on the sea had vanished as well. Only the ancient ship remained, floating directly beneath the lighthouse. Its deck was empty. Every blue lantern had disappeared. The storm returned all at once. Rain crashed against the glass. Thunder shook the tower. The ocean roared beneath him. It was as if the world had suddenly started moving again. Ethan rushed downstairs to the generator room. If he couldn't stop the lighthouse from the top, maybe he could shut off the power entirely. The spiral staircase seemed longer than before. He had climbed it dozens of times during the past week. Now it felt endless. His flashlight flickered constantly. 1 level, 2 levels, 3. The stairs should have ended. Instead, they continued downward. Further, further. The air became damp. The smell of salt water grew stronger. Then, he heard voices, hundreds of them, whispering at once. Not screaming, not shouting, simply whispering his name. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. Every whisper sounded closer than the last. He reached the bottom of the staircase. Except, it wasn't the generator room. He stood inside a massive underground chamber. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Sea water covered the stone floor. Ancient chains hung from enormous pillars. In the center of the chamber stood a lighthouse. Not the one above. Another one. Older. Far older. Its stone walls were cracked, covered with barnacles. Its lantern burned with the same unnatural blue flame. Around it stood dozens of lighthouse keepers, all silent, all wearing uniforms from different centuries. Some looked like they had worked there in the 1800s. Others looked almost modern. Every one of them held an unlit lantern. Every one of them slowly turned toward Ethan. None of them had eyes. Only smooth skin where their faces should have been. A deep bell echoed through the chamber. 1, 2, 3. The blue lighthouse suddenly became brighter. The keepers all raised their lanterns together. Their empty faces turned toward Ethan. Then every lantern ignited with blue fire. At exactly the same moment, every keeper spoke, not separately, as one voice. The light chooses. The sea remembers. The keeper never leaves. The floor beneath Ethan's boots trembled. The seawater around him began rising. Fast. Within seconds it reached his ankles, then his knees. The ancient lighthouse door slowly opened. Warm golden light poured out from inside. Unlike the blue flame, this light felt peaceful, safe. A voice came from within, calm, gentle. It was his father's voice. Ethan, come inside. I've been waiting for you. Ethan hadn't heard his father's voice in years. He had died when Ethan was only 15. Tears filled his eyes. Dad? The keepers remained perfectly still. The water continued rising. His father's voice echoed once more. Please, before the sea reaches you, there's still time. Ethan took one step toward the open lighthouse door, then noticed something that made him freeze. His father wasn't casting a shadow, but something standing behind him was. The shadow behind his father slowly moved. His father didn't. He stood perfectly still inside the doorway, smiling exactly as Ethan remembered. Warm eyes, gentle voice, the same old jacket he always wore when taking Ethan fishing as a kid. Dad, Ethan whispered. His father's smile grew wider. Come inside. It's finally over. You don't have to be afraid anymore. The water climbed higher. Now it reached Ethan's waist. The ancient keepers never moved. Their blue lanterns illuminated the flooded chamber with an unnatural glow. Only the shadow behind his father continued growing. Longer, taller. Its shape stretched across the stone floor like spilled ink. It didn't belong to a human. It had horns, thin, twisted, almost like broken branches. Ethan took another step toward the lighthouse. Then he heard something. Very faint, a whisper behind him, not from the keepers, not from the water, the old keeper. Ethan, don't look at your father. Look at his feet. His entire body froze. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered his eyes. His father's boots weren't touching the floor. He floated several inches above the stone. The shadow beneath him didn't match his body at all. It had far too many arms, one after another. Long black hands slowly wrapped around his father's body from behind. They weren't holding him. They were wearing him, like a coat. The cold hand tightened around Ethan's shoulder. Every instinct screamed at him not to turn around. But it was too late. The whisper had been right. He had already moved. The moment he looked over his shoulder, there was nothing there. No hand, no person, only darkness. Then he felt something impossible. His own shadow was moving, not because of the light. By itself, the black shape at his feet slowly separated from the floor. It stood up, same height, same build, same face. It looked exactly like Ethan, except its eyes glowed with the same blue light as the lanterns. The shadow smiled. I've been waiting for you. Ethan stumbled backward. What are you? The shadow calmly tilted its head. I'm what every keeper leaves behind. When the sea takes the body, it keeps the shadow. The flooded chamber began shaking harder. Pieces of stone crashed into the water. The ancient lighthouse groaned as cracks spread across its walls. The shadow calmly walked toward Ethan. Unlike everyone else, its footsteps made no sound. It stopped only inches away, then reached into Ethan's jacket pocket. Without touching him, the employee key ring slowly floated out by itself. Every brass key began vibrating violently. One key glowed blue. The shadow picked it up. This one, the keeper's key. Ethan grabbed for it. His hand passed straight through the shadow's arm, like reaching through smoke. The shadow smiled wider. You can't touch me. Not anymore. Suddenly, a blinding white beam exploded across the chamber. The real lighthouse above had turned. Its beams somehow pierced the ocean, the rock, and the earth itself. The ancient chamber was flooded with brilliant white light. Every eyeless keeper screamed together. The sound wasn't human. It echoed like thousands of whales crying beneath the sea. The shadow looked frightened for the first time. It found us. The old keeper appeared again on the opposite side of the chamber. His lantern now burned with white fire instead of blue. He pointed toward a narrow stone bridge leading behind the ancient lighthouse. Ethan, the beam opened the way. You have one chance. The shadow lunged at him. This time it was fast, far faster than any human. Ethan threw himself toward the bridge. The shadow's fingers barely missed his face. Behind him, the ancient keepers began chasing him, not running, gliding silently over the water. Hundreds of blue lanterns floated after them like ghostly stars. Ethan sprinted across the narrow bridge. It crumbled beneath every step. Stone blocks crashed into the whirlpool below. He didn't dare look back. The old keeper shouted one final warning. Whatever happens, when you reach the door, don't answer if someone you love calls your name. The bridge collapsed completely behind Ethan. The keepers stopped at the edge. None of them crossed. They simply stood together, watching him, waiting. At the end of the bridge stood an enormous rusted metal door. Ancient words were carved into its surface. Only the keeper may leave. Before Ethan could reach the handle, he heard his mother's voice behind him. Soft, terrified. Ethan, please don't leave me here. Then his father's voice. I'm proud of you, son. Then his little sister. Come on, just one hug. Tears filled his eyes. Every voice sounded perfect, exactly as he remembered. His hand slowly reached for the door. Then, the voices all laughed, at exactly the same time, and Ethan realized they had all spoken with the same breath. The laughter echoed through the chamber, not from one voice, from hundreds. Every voice Ethan loved blended together into one impossible sound. His mother's, his father's, his sister's, his own, all laughing, all mocking him. He stopped listening. He wrapped both hands around the rusted door handle and pulled with everything he had. Nothing. The massive door didn't move. The old keeper shouted from across the collapsing bridge. The key. Ethan looked down. The glowing brass key still floated in the air several feet behind him. Ethan tore the brass plaque from the wall. It crashed onto the stone floor. The metal bent, but his name remained. Ethan Brooks, Keeper. The letters refused to scratch away. He ran outside. Morning sunlight covered the ocean. Fishing boats moved peacefully across the water. Everything looked completely normal. For a moment, he actually believed it was over. Then he noticed something strange. Every boat on the horizon had stopped moving. The waves continued. The wind continued. But the boats remained perfectly still, as if time had frozen around them. One by one, the captain slowly turned toward the lighthouse. Even from miles away, Ethan could somehow see their faces. Every one of them smiled. The same smile. His radio suddenly turned on. The supervisor sounded relieved. "Ethan, you finally answered. Are you all right?" Ethan grabbed the radio. "I'm leaving. I'm done." There was a long silence. Then the supervisor quietly replied, "I'm afraid you can't." "What do you mean?" "The replacement boat arrived an hour ago. It turned around. They said the lighthouse already has a keeper." Ethan's blood ran cold. "No, I'm standing outside. I can leave whenever I want." The supervisor sighed. "I've heard that sentence before." "What?" "My grandfather worked dispatch. He received the exact same radio call from another keeper 42 years ago." Ethan slowly looked back at the lighthouse. The front door had disappeared. Only solid stone remained. His heartbeat quickened. He ran around the entire building. No entrance. No windows on the first floor. Nothing. The lighthouse had become one solid tower of stone. The radio crackled again. The supervisor's voice was gone. Instead, the old keeper spoke. "I told you. The sea never lets its keeper leave." Ethan spun around. The old keeper stood on the rocks below. His white lantern had almost gone out. Only a tiny flame remained. "You escaped the chamber, but not the lighthouse. The lighthouse is the prison. The chamber was only the door." The old keeper slowly removed his badge. His name disappeared. His body began fading into sea mist. "My shift is over. Now, it's yours." He vanished. Completely. The white lantern fell onto the rocks. Its flame died instantly. At that exact moment, the giant lighthouse lamp above Ethan roared to life. The beam began rotating across the ocean again. Far away, beyond the morning fog, Ethan saw another ship. Old, rotting, silent, exactly like the first one. Except this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, dozens more emerged from the fog. Then hundreds. An endless fleet stretched across the horizon. Every ship slowly turned toward Blackwater Lighthouse. Every deck was filled with silent figures carrying dark lanterns. Every one of them looked up, waiting for the light to find them again. Then Ethan heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. A young man nervously climbed the lighthouse stairs carrying a backpack and a flashlight. He smiled awkwardly. "Hi, my name's Noah. They said I'm your relief." Ethan closed his eyes, because he had spoken those exact same words to the old keeper On his first night, Noah stepped onto the lighthouse platform carrying a backpack over one shoulder. He looked young, maybe 23, nervous, excited, exactly the way Ethan had looked on his first day. He smiled politely. "So, I guess you're the night keeper?" Ethan didn't answer. He simply stared at him. Noah laughed awkwardly. "The ferry captain said you haven't spoken much. I don't blame you. This place is creepy." Ethan slowly walked toward him. "You need to leave." Noah frowned. "What? Leave? Right now? The boat is still outside." Noah chuckled. "I can't. I signed a 6-month contract. They've already paid me." Ethan grabbed Noah's arm. "Hard. I'm serious. Get back on the boat." Noah pulled away. "Dude, you're scaring me." At that exact moment, the lighthouse horn blasted. A deep, deafening sound rolled across the ocean. Noah turned toward the sea. What was that? Ethan already knew. The fleet. Far beyond the fog, hundreds of ancient ships had stopped. Every dark lantern aboard them ignited at once. Blue flames stretched across the horizon like a second sky. Noah stared in disbelief. "What? What are those?" "They're coming," Ethan whispered. Noah slowly backed toward the lighthouse door. "We should call the Coast Guard." He reached for his phone. No signal. Then he looked at Ethan again. "You knew? You knew all this?" Ethan nodded. "I tried to leave. It doesn't let me." Before Noah could answer, the lighthouse beam stopped moving. For the first time all morning, it pointed directly at the fleet. Every ship answered, one after another. Their horns echoed across the sea. The sound was so loud the lighthouse windows shattered. The ocean began rising. Not waves. The entire sea. The water climbed higher and higher until it surrounded the rock beneath the lighthouse. Noah ran for the stairs. The front door slammed shut before he reached it. Locked. Exactly the way it had locked for Ethan. "No," Noah whispered. "No." Ethan lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I couldn't stop it." The lighthouse speakers crackled. A calm voice echoed through every room. "Keeper transfer complete." Noah looked confused. "What does that mean?" Ethan slowly removed the brass badge from his jacket. The word keeper faded away. His name disappeared. The badge became completely blank. He placed it into Noah's trembling hand. The moment Noah touched it, his own name appeared. Noah Carter. Keeper. Noah screamed and threw it onto the floor. It instantly returned to his pocket. The lighthouse accepted him. The sea had chosen again. Ethan suddenly felt lighter. For the first time in what felt like forever, the whispers stopped. The cold disappeared. He looked toward the horizon. The ancient fleet slowly turned away. The blue lanterns went dark. One by one, the ships vanished into the fog. The lighthouse door unlocked with a loud click. Sunlight poured inside. Ethan smiled sadly. "It's over." Noah looked at him desperately. "Don't leave me." Ethan remembered saying those exact words to the old keeper. The same fear, the same hopelessness. He walked toward the open door. Just before stepping outside, he turned back one last time. Remember the rule. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, never let the light find the sea after 3 o'clock. Then Ethan stepped into the sunlight. The door closed behind him. When he looked back, Blackwater Lighthouse had disappeared. Only endless ocean remained. No rock, no tower, nothing. Yet every year, sailors still report seeing a lonely lighthouse appear in the middle of violent storms, its beams sweeping across the waves, searching, waiting for the next keeper.